Good morning and welcome to episode number 118 of Simplifying Live with me, Shashank. I'm your host and the CEO of Simplifying. Imagine investing $10 billion, yes, not million, $10 billion in a new product, securing 8,000 orders, and then the press saying, guess what, the competition has secured 10 times those orders in the last 1 year. Sounds confusing. Did the competition get 80,000 orders? No. We're referring here to the Gear Turbofan engine by Pratt Whitney. It's a highly advanced engine built from the ground up, and it entered into service, I believe, last year, and it's been experiencing teething troubles. Now, just for context, that's not new for engines, not new for aircraft. In fact, in aviation, whenever a new product is introduced, it experiences teething troubles. The Gear Turbofan engine, the GTF by Pratt Whitney, to give you some context once again, is the exclusive engine for the Bombardier C series. It's one of the two engines on offer for the A320neo. Whereas a competitor, CFM by GE, is the exclusive for Boeing 737 MAX, as well as one of the choices for the Airbus A320neo. Now, given that context now, where's the trouble? What's the situation? The situation is that the GTF has entered into service, and unfortunately, because of certain things not working out technically and having teething troubles, in the last, let me get the stats right, in the last 46% of Airbus A320neo powered by the GTF were out of service for at least 1 week or more in the last 1 month, compared to just 9% of the planes powered by the GE engine. That's how big the difference is in terms of teething troubles, for context. And that seems to have, caused some panic in the market, wherein more people are now ordering more GE engines as opposed to the GTF, which gets us to the figure of 39 orders for the GTF in the last 1 year versus 396 engine orders for the GE engine. And that's where the contrast begins. It's almost, and I'll explain to you why this human behavior is something we're experiencing. Imagine you want to go to a hotel, and you look for reviews on TripAdvisor. Guess what? It doesn't matter what the review said in 2010. What matters is what the latest review says. In fact, it matters what the last 20 reviews says. And that's why the now matters so much in today's day and age. And that's why, let me connect this with communication and marketing. Marketing and communication is always about building the long-term brand, playing the long game. It's not so much about the now. The now is almost as if, hey, let's just wait for the funny cat video and things will go quickly get over, and we can continue moving. But that's not the case anymore. Communications is about now, today, even in B2B, not just B2C. TripAdvisor is just one example. You check reviews for restaurants all the time on Yelp or on Foursquare before you walk in. And it doesn't matter what the dish tasted like 10 years ago. What matters is what the guy said yesterday about the dish. And that's what is happening with the GTF. Because the current market sentiment is negative, it's impacting sales. Even though technically speaking, guess what? If I'm an airline and I order a GTF right now, I won't be getting it for a few years anyway. And by then, I'm expecting Pratt Whitney would have ironed out all the issues anyway. So technically, it shouldn't matter, but it is mattering. And that's why I believe that this is squarely a marketing and communications issue rather than a product or sales issue. Product and sales are used to teething troubles and they'll get over them. And yes, this time it seems a bit more severe than last time, but they will get over them. But marketing and communications' job is to ensure that the market sentiment does not turn against the product, which is technically sound and perhaps even superior, because they have delivered very well on their fuel numbers, for example, when they have been operating in service. So how do we address this situation? given that it's a marketing and communication situation rather than a technical situation, especially in the medium to long term for Pratt & Whitney. In the medium to long term, all technical snags will be gone, and they're working hard on it. I mean, they have talented engineers, and an engine is a complicated product. So how do we address the marketing communication thing? For this, I'll go back to a conversation I was having in Toulouse. I was at Airbus headquarters a few years back, and I was having lunch with a former, very senior communications person at Airbus. And he candidly asked, why is it that every single time the 787 has an issue, the Boeing stock goes up? And I was like, wow, that's a very interesting question. And in our work, we've had the opportunity and the pleasure to work both with Airbus and Boeing. And it's true, every single time Boeing hit a snag, especially on technical terms, the stock went up. So what Boeing was doing was something right in terms of communications and marketing. So I dug deeper and I had lots of chats. And what I realized was Boeing's communication team is extremely proactive. In the industry, they're known to have a communications team that is larger than the White House communication team, but that serves a purpose, a very strong purpose. They're a very proactive team that has built huge relationships and very personal relationships across the globe with their key clients. So when I was, for example, involved in the launch of the 787 for LAN Airlines, we had spent 6 to 9 months building up the hype for the 787 that is going to be the first in Latin America, and then the fleet got grounded and we were like, okay, what do we do? It was at that time that Boeing literally dispatched its top communications and marketing people to work with these airlines to ensure that these issues are being addressed, whether or not the airline faced those issues. So Japan Airlines had the issue, but there was a Boeing person talking directly with LAN Airlines and now LATAM. And that's the level of engagement that the communications and marketing teams had even at that time. Now it's even more that proactiveness is needed. For example, GTF suffered a lot in India. And yes, that's not necessarily the core competence market for the Pratt & Whitney communications team. They may not have such good relationships with journalists in India as they might do in DC, for example. But the fact is that there are more A320neos operating in India in a very dusty, polluted environment, and hence the engines are more likely to have problems there. And it makes complete sense to have individual communication representatives for each of the airlines in India operating the NEO, having one-to-one relationships with journalists in India. And I know Pratt has been working hard on this, but it seems that the spillover is being seen in the US and everywhere else, where Bloomberg report came out talking about these numbers that I've just shared with you, about the 10x result for GE compared to 10x sales for GE compared to Pratt in the last 1 year. So we really need to think different. The old adage of communications where, you know what, something goes wrong, lie low, funny cat video comes up, and things are taken care of, does not work anymore. Certainly not in B2C and now not in B2B as well. Pratt, I believe, needs to be extremely proactive in communications. They need to be very creative as well. I know there are lots of efforts going on where Pratt must be working with the airlines, but why not go public with these efforts? Why not have a live video like this, wherein you can have your chief engineer talking about what's being done with the engine and put that video up. Have a weekly update, not a press release, but someone people can relate to, someone someone who's technically very sound and knows what he's talking about, and put that out on Facebook Live. Why not? It's a medium that's there, it gets shared, and you have to put your people out. Why? Because people listen to people. They don't listen to press releases, they stay on the fax machine, and it just doesn't get read. So you have to introduce people. That's the other part. Communications today is a lot to do with storytelling. And strong storytelling is not just about rebuttals and defensive maneuvers. Strong storytelling requires individuals, and that's where the people part comes in as well. And I do believe that Pratt's storytelling needs to be much stronger, not just with regards to GTF, but how it's tackling the situation proactively. What are the efforts that are going on in place? We don't seem to hear a lot about these because articles like the one that Bloomberg published have very specific statistics, like 46%, and the rebuttals that come from Pratt are pretty generic statements that, yes, we are working on it. We don't see the numbers or the individuals, and those efforts need to be there. Working with analysts, I do believe there's been one analyst who's been writing about Pratt and about the GTF every time there's a negative issue, but it almost reads like a press statement from Pratt itself, not necessarily an unbiased view. So why not, have an analyst dinner and, be very, very proactive, especially in these times, with a group of analysts rather than just working with one or two, because ultimately it's the people who are influencing the influencer. So there are a bunch of these things. Communications has evolved, communications has changed, and the old adage does not apply anymore. We have to think creative, we have to be proactive, and we certainly cannot stay low. Pratt and the GTF is a really good engine. It should not be suffering like this, and I do believe that the answer lies in creative communications and not continuing in the same old way. What do you think? Do you think communication is the issue? Some other issue is there that Pratt is being impacted by? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments or on Twitter. Meanwhile, enjoy the rest of the day. I'll catch you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. GMT. Till then, have a great day. Bye-bye.